And now I'd like to introduce Louisa Horn, who's going to kick us off. Louisa is a past chair of the district leadership team, what you may know as past district governor, and is now the innovative club advocate team lead for zones 28 and 32. Welcome, Louisa and friends.
Thank you, Leanne. Maybe I need an acronym. Do we have acronyms in Rotary? That might help there with that long title. But thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here, and it's been so fun watching all of the countries fly by on my screen. I saw them from all over the place. So it's wonderful to have such a wide range of people with us today, and we hope that you will enjoy it. I'll say we are in North America. However, you will see that we have looked at data and information from around the world. So we hope we're able to be relevant to everyone with what we're going to share with you today. So this is the second in a series. We'll do a little bit of a review coming up, but we're hoping that you will find today valuable and that you'll come back for number 3. It's a 3-parter, so you'll hear more about that later. So my job right now is to introduce the team. And so you've already heard who I am. I'm going to jump to Herb Klotz. Now, Herb has been very instrumental in the design and delivery of the first session in particular. He's not with us today. He's otherwise engaged, but he is the Zone 32 coordinator who has been very much part of this process and is a real data enthusiast. So he's been very, very much involved in everything that you're going to see today. I'd like to introduce Terry Weaver, who's the Zone 33 coordinator. Terry, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Thanks, Louisa. I'm the Rotary coordinator for Zone 33, which stretches from the state of South Carolina in the United States up the Atlantic coast to Pennsylvania. And now I'd like to introduce Doug Logan.
Hi, everybody. Doug Logan. I'm the Rotary coordinator for Zone 28. Rotary coordinator is basically a membership champion for a particular area. And in my case, Zone 28 is pretty big. It stretches for all of Canada, except for Vancouver Island. It includes the state of Alaska, plus a few areas of the northern part of the United States. So I get to communicate with people through 6 time zones, which you'll appreciate makes for interesting meeting times. So just a quick summary of what we've been doing and what we're planning on doing. Many of you will remember the first session that we did with Herb Klotz, talking about the study we did, which helped us discover the 5 attributes of successful clubs. In this session, Terry is going to take us into a bit of a deep dive into the data and how the data and using data will help us determine the most appropriate strategies for us to follow in our individual clubs. And the next session, Louisa and I will take you through a process of deciding what strategies you ought to follow and what you can do to improve the experience and the success of your own club. So just a quick review on why we're focusing on membership and why we're focusing on growth. People like to think about Rotary as a service organization, and that is true. But the truth also is that if we don't have members to deliver that service, we're not going to have the impact that we want to have. So really, we would like you to think about Rotary as a membership organization. And if we can get membership right, if we can keep people engaged, if we can grow, new members, more members is going to have a real dramatic impact on our ability to serve. So new members equals greater impact. And now just a quick review of what Herb talked about in the last session and a summary of why these things are important. So the first is the successful clubs had strong leadership. It goes without saying, and I've seen that over and over and over, the impact that leadership has on what any organization is able to do. So strong leadership, but it was a particular kind of leadership that people demonstrated. And that was like a servant leadership, where the membership of the club, the community, is what drove what the leaders did. The other attributes is that these clubs had many events and projects that they were engaged in. They did lots of different things, and their projects tend to happen throughout the year as opposed to just one event. In addition to that, they were visible in the community using social media and other resources to get the word out about who they were and what they were doing. So in addition to being active in the community, they were seen to be doing in the community. They established clear goals and had membership plans. A very high percentage of those clubs were goal-oriented. And then finally, equally importantly, they were active and intentional about engaging their members.
That's great, Doug. I think those attributes are so important, and hopefully everyone that didn't attend the first session will have an opportunity to see the recording so they can understand that. But I'm curious, today we're going to be diving into data. We've just seen those wonderful attributes, but I'm curious, how is this data going to help us as an organization?
The best way for me to answer that is to start by telling a little story. A number of years ago, I was the executive director of a social service agency that was community-based, and our focus was to provide services and supports for people and families of those people who had disabilities. One day I was having lunch with another executive director, and we got into an argument because he was telling me that, and what he said to me was, if you can do it, you can measure it. And I reacted to that because I thought to myself, and I said to him, well, how do you measure caring? You can't measure caring. And he kept insisting if we could do it, we could measure it. The lunch ended without us resolving the question. And as I was driving back to my office, it hit me, and a question came to me. If I can't measure it, does that mean I'm not doing it? And that started us down a path of having a hard look at what we were doing and how we could actually keep track of what was happening and the quality of the services we were providing. And it ended up having a dramatic impact, not just on the type of services we provided, but our ability to grow and serve even more people. So I will turn it over to Terry and ask the question, what does data mean to us in Rotary?
Thanks, Doug. Well, as you made the point clearly, any organization needs to measure and understand its gains and losses. Now, that's whether it is tenants in a rental property, or perhaps customers of a commercial company, or in our case, members. Is our base shrinking or growing, and exactly how fast? So we measure that in terms of an attrition rate. Attrition rate means a rate of loss, which is the percentage of clubs that leave, a percentage of members that leave a club in an average year. And that would be, for example, a 40-member club has 6 terminations in a year. That's a 15% rate of loss or attrition rate. Now, most of the past data you've seen on termination rates in Rotary has been focused on retention. I want to make the point that these are the same measurement. Retention is just 100% minus the attrition rate, or vice versa. So 85% retention is exactly the same thing as 15% attrition. The difference is, if I'm the president or the membership chair, it doesn't do me any good to know how many members I'm likely to keep. That's interesting, but not useful information. What I need to know is how many members am I likely to lose and therefore need to replace. That's your attrition rate. Then there's your attraction rate. Your attraction rate is the rate of gain. In other words, how fast are we increasing our attracting membership? So it's the number of members attracted in a given year divided by the starting count of membership. So you just subtract the attrition rate from the attraction rate, and you have the net growth rate, which of course could be positive or negative depending on which is bigger. So let's talk about some of the realities in a membership organization. As I mentioned, I've analyzed membership trends from our entire zone in North America, 846 Rotary clubs, almost 1,000. And I'll grant you that I am a recovering engineer. I spent most of my career managing large businesses for shareholders and looking at this kind of data in the big picture. And engineers, of course, love to roll around in a huge data set like this. Now, I've since acquired data for the entire world. I have the data on 40,000 Rotary clubs across 530 districts. So here's what we learned. The first is that it's not true that all Rotary clubs are shrinking. Now, we've heard that Rotary has been declining in membership worldwide up until this past year. It's also true that North America has been declining in membership, but it's not true that all Rotary clubs are shrinking. I also learned that attrition is real. Now, I knew this from my business experience. Organizations lose customers. Membership organizations lose members, and at remarkably consistent rates year to year. Our average across the globe is round numbers 15%, which is also round numbers the average in all of North America, about 15% attrition. And you might say, gee, that seems to be real high, Terry. Well, you'd think that if you didn't realize that the average trade association, for example, in North America, loses members at a rate of about 15% a year. The average insurance agency, think property, casualty, life, somebody like Allstate, State Farm, they lose customers at a rate of about 16% a year. And even a cell phone provider, where you have people pretty much locked into 3 years of payments on a phone, they turn over customers at a rate of about 13% a year. So what do all those folks have in common? What they have in common is, first of all, they know that number. And secondly, they got over it. Get over it. We're going to lose members each year. And so we need a business strategy or a membership strategy that consistently refreshes our membership base, all the while doing absolutely everything we can to keep all the members that we have. So what I learned is that these attrition rates year over year are remarkably consistent. If I look at a 3-year average attrition rate for a Rotary Club, I can pretty well predict that that same number of terminations is going to happen in the coming year and probably the year after that, unless something dramatically changes. Now, retention is essential. It's absolutely important. Every member you keep is a member you don't have to replace. But watch this. It is highly overrated as a growth strategy. You cannot retain your way from 20 to 25 members. New member attraction is the key to not only growth, but even holding your own. So unless something changes, what I learned is that if a club has been growing over the past 3 years, say 2019, July 1st to 2022, July 1st, that 3-year window, the clubs that grew during that 3-year window have an 80% likelihood of continuing to grow. Success breeds success. You've heard that before. Now, similarly and sadly, a club that has declined over the past 3 years will continue to decline at about an 80% likelihood. Success breeds success, and sadly, failure also breeds failure. So then there are the clubs in the middle, say plus or minus 5% net gain or loss over a total of 3 years. And they're kind of holding their own. And I call that a fragile balance. And here's why. If your club's objective is to hold its own, basically a break-even strategy, when we want to hold our own at 25 members or 40 members or 60 members or whatever that number is, okay? Well, if that's your idea and your strategies are focused on just break even, you'll rarely overshoot that. It'd be highly unlikely for a 60-member club whose objective is breaking even to say pop up to 65. It just won't happen. You just stop attracting people when you think you have the goal in sight. But regularly, clubs fail at that break-even strategy. It's not uncommon at all for a 60-member club to end up at 57 or 58. And if you do that enough years in a row, you'll be at 50. So there's some common patterns among clubs. And I thought I'd just walk through these with you because they really are almost a signature, if you will, of a club's attrition attraction attributes. There's the low attrition club, a club at least in North America, below 10% attrition. Now, I'll come back and talk about those attrition rate thresholds. There's also the high attraction rate club. And when those come into alignment in the same club, clubs losing members at a rate below 15% and gaining them at a rate above 15%, that's what we call a growth culture. That's a club that simply believes that their club is going to be larger every year by just a consistent, moderate amount. 2 or 3 members, maybe 5% would be consistent, moderate membership growth. Then there's the high attrition club, above 18%, above the global average. And when that's combined with low attraction, attracting members at a rate below 10%, then you got a real problem. That is a danger zone. If I'm losing members at a rate of 18% and I'm attracting members at a rate of only 10%, basically, I've got a club that is simply shrinking by nature. Now, just to be clear, this is not about the numbers. This is not about the numbers. This is about sustainability. The sustainability of a Rotary Club, the ability of a Rotary Club to serve its community, the ability of a Rotary Club to continue to support the Rotary Foundation, to do all the things that a Rotary Club does, that depends on people. That depends on members. So by definition, a Rotary Club to be more successful in the future than it has been probably needs to be bigger. And you can easily say that a Rotary Club that is getting smaller year to year is definitely losing its critical mass, losing its ability to do what it does. Now, an attrition rate below 10% combined with a low attraction rate also below 10%. This is a really common pattern. And I've seen clubs focus entirely on keeping members, and kind of forget that we need to attract them. What happens then, it's not uncommon for that to also include a club that's simply aging out together. In other words, the median age of the club members is advancing roughly 1 year per year. And it's not at all uncommon for a very low attrition rate club to be shrinking. Those are surprisingly correlated. So let's take a look at another possibility, such as a high attrition rate club that also has a very high rate of attracting members. What does that look like? Well, what that is a club of high turnover. A club of high turnover. And that's not in itself a problem, depending on particularly where you are in the world. For example, the average turnover rate, the average attrition rates in zones in, for example, Asia, is in the 18 to 20% range. Yet those districts and zones are growing because they attract members at a 22 to 24% rate. Well, if you can sustain that, that'll work. It might be better to work a little harder in that case. If your attrition rate's over 18%, you probably want to work a little harder on keeping members. Then there are the clubs in the middle. What does that look like? Well, that's where you get into that fragile balance. The idea that we can just fly our club level at break even is very difficult to sustain. That is a tricky balance. That's a tricky balance. Why not instead plan on moderate, consistent growth of, say, 5% a year? There's no 30-member club that's going to be harmed by the addition of 2 members. It's not going to change the culture. It's not going to get us too big where we know it, forget who all our members are. 30-member club growing at a couple of members a year would be, in my estimation, the earmark of a healthy club. So how do we engage and keep our members? Well, it depends greatly on where you are and what the data looks like. Here's a club in Nigeria, for example. This club attracts members at a rate of 26% a year and loses them at only 5%. Absolutely exemplary. The fact is that that rate of attraction does present some challenges in terms of onboarding members and absorbing them long-term. Club in Venezuela, it's got an attrition rate of 13%. Not bad with respect to North or South America. Attrition is not this club's problem, but I can tell you that most clubs in the world attracting members at a rate of below 10% is a shrinking club, which it is in this case. Then let's take a look at Italy. Here's now in Europe, particularly Germanic Europe, attrition rates are very much lower, dramatically lower. Here's a club with an attrition rate of only 2.5%. Sadly, They're not doing anything with that. They're only attracting members at a rate of about 1.7%, meaning they're losing about 0.5% a year. And that is, I can assure you, without even looking at the demographic data, which I don't have, but without looking at the demographic data in this club, I can tell you that this club is getting older year by year, probably most of its members over 60. It's just a pattern. In the UK, attrition rate of 52%. Wow, that'd take your breath away. Now, they are attracting members at a rate of 48%. So they're coming close to break even, but they're still in a little bit of declining danger. And I might suppose that this could perhaps be an E-club. E-clubs do have these higher attrition rates because of the transient nature of an E-club's membership. And then here's a club in India, 12% attrition, exemplary, excellent, 17% attraction, certainly a rate that you can accommodate in terms of adding members to the club. I don't have the member count here, but this would basically be a 20-member club that's grown to 24 in the course of a year. And then finally, Lithuania. Here's a club, again, attrition rate of 5.5%, doing a great job of holding on to members, but they just don't ever invite anybody to join. So like the sample club, now these are individual clubs, not districts or zones. It's like this sample club in Italy, exactly the same story. The club in Italy, the club in Lithuania, I bet you, if you swapped those clubs, just somehow magically transported one club from one place to the other, nobody noticed the difference on either end because they pretty much act just alike. I can see that in the data. So here's some essential lessons I'd like to leave you with. First, that attrition is real. Now, the global average in North America, as I mentioned, is almost 15%. The North American average is just north of 15%. And then here's this idea of best in class. Best in class, at least for North America, seems to be right at 8 to 10%. And I say that because I have poured through this data over 5 years. And in almost any district, I rarely see attrition rate better than about 8 to 10%. That's about as good as it gets on a 3-year average basis. So I'm saying to myself, Terry, that must be a club that's really good at holding on to members. In other words, that must be about the life happens level. That must be the level at which neither the members or the club could really do anything about that termination. People in North America are mobile. It's a mobile population. It's a transient workforce and getting more that way. And so, people change jobs, people relocate, things happen, health issues, et cetera. And that balance seems to be at about 8 to 10% a year. So here's the lesson from that. A club with a lower attrition rate in that range in North America really can't improve much by working harder at holding on to members. You're already there. You're doing as well as can be done. Double down on what you're doing to keep members engaged, to keep members in the club. On the other hand, since you can't improve much by working harder on attrition, if your club is not growing, you're going to have to focus rather on attracting members. Now, I mentioned that these numbers are different. In Germanic Europe, for example, Germany and Switzerland, there are 3 zones in Germany and Switzerland that have unbelievably low attrition rates. And in those countries, the life happens attrition rate, the best in class, is, believe it or not, right about 1%. 1%, which also happens to be almost exactly the mortality rate in most clubs in the world. Most districts in the world lose about 1% of their members to death each year. So remarkably great job of holding on to members. Sadly, those same districts are not doing much with that advantage. They're not meaningfully growing. Now, attrition rates over 15%, those need attention. You've got members voting with their feet. They're leaving at rates higher than the global average, higher than the North American average. Now, again, that average is a little bit higher in Asia in the 18 to 20% range. So if you get up in that zone, you know that people are leaving your club and they're doing it for a reason. People don't quit Rotary. They quit Rotary clubs. People don't wake up one morning and say, you know, that four-way test thing, I'm just not sure about that. They wake up one morning and say, I am tired of this Rotary Club that's not doing anything meaningful and not meeting my expectations. As I mentioned, retention is highly overrated as a growth strategy. It's an important membership strategy, but you can't grow by just holding on to people. You have to attract members faster than you lose them. Almost goes without saying, but I still had to say it. And knowing your club's history would be important in all this, right? Knowing what your situation is, whether your problem is attrition or attraction, and actually having the data would be essential to success. Now, let's talk about some essential metrics. Some essential metrics in a Rotary Club. We talked about the attrition rate. I need to know the rate at which people leave my club each year in order to plan on that essentially same rate of replacement in the coming year. Unless something dramatically changes, it's going to be very, very similar. Now, then we're talking about the attraction rate. How fast am I on average attracting members? And unless you do something different, that's going to be about the same too. The third thing you need to know then is that attrition rate converted to a whole member count. In other words, what does 5% attrition mean in terms of the actual number of members? Obviously, in a larger club, it's going to be a bigger number. So we want to look at that actual attrition count because that's really what your membership committee has to plan on in terms of replacement in order to hold your ground and then grow moderately and consistently. So I'd like to call your attention to your goal setting worksheet. If you haven't pulled that down already, you'll notice the URL up here, bit.ly/myworksheetri, or you can use this QR code, or of course, fish out the link that you got in the email prior to the webinar. But let's take a look at your goal setting worksheet. Now, I put a sample club on the screen so we have something to talk about together. The first thing I'd like you to look at is the attrition rate. What is your club's annual attrition rate? In the case of this club, a club in North America, 13.3% is a just fine attrition rate. They could knock that down maybe a couple of points, maybe if they just lost one fewer member a year, they'd get this down to say 11, but that's about as good as it gets. Then you have to look at your attraction rate. Your attraction rate, 8.6% in the case of this club. Now, I picked this club because this is a club I am gravely worried about. This is a club that absolutely follows that pattern of a low attrition rate and an even lower attraction rate. This is a group of old men and their fathers that are aging out. The median age of this club is advancing literally 1 year per year. Now, what I'd like you to do is do the math. Subtract the smaller number from the larger to determine your club's actual net growth rate. If you need to, I'll give you a moment to reach for your calculator on your mobile phone. What is the net growth rate, plus or minus? We figured out the sign for you, of course. If your attrition rate is higher than your attraction rate, in this case, it's negative 4.7%. So the question is then, what problem does your club need to solve? In the case of this club, it's not low retention. It's not that their attrition rate is too high. It's insufficient new member attraction. They're just not putting enough effort into inviting people to join their club. So let's look at the result of that. Scroll down to the bottom of the page. Now we're going to talk about your club, your history, and your goals. And the club on the screen, for example, they've managed their way down from 39 to 30 members over the course of only 4 years, 39 to 30 over 4 years. And I say managed their way because the leaders of this club chose and executed the strategies that caused this to happen. There's not an external environment that caused this problem. Even a pandemic didn't meaningfully change our attrition rates. It did slow down attraction in many clubs. So the question is, how did these guys get here? And I say guys because this is largely an older male club. Well, they got here from 65 members in 2004. They've literally managed their way down from 65 members to 30 members since 2004, 18 years. The year just before this 5-year graph looked like this. They were at 42 members. They were at 42 members. So let's put a little trend line on this. The trend line is a decline rate of exactly 2 members a year, which is interesting because in my work and rolling around in this data for 5 years and looking at the characteristics, particularly of shrinking clubs, they almost all decline at a rate of 2 members a year. I'll say that again. When clubs are on this decline path, we think it's okay to be a couple of members smaller than we were the past year. It's almost exactly 2 members a year. So I've concluded that that's within the threshold of pain. That is simply small enough that it doesn't get anybody's attention, that it doesn't make it worth doing anything different. Well, that's of course how this club got from 65 to 55 members in 5 years, from 55 to 45 in the next 5, and now you see them sell 30. Absent anything changing, I'd absolutely expect 5 years from now, I would put money on this club being at 20 members. That's just the track they're on. Now, let's take a look at your club's goals. Taking a look at the right-hand column at the top, this is your membership as of July 1st, 2022. This is the official count from the RI data. And the question is, what would be a reasonable membership goal for the end of this year, for July 1st, 2023? What would be a reasonable net gain of members in your club? Say 5 to 10%, nothing flashy. In the case of this club, I would think, given their history, they could easily get themselves back to, say, 33 members in the course of a year. So what would then be the number of members in that third cell, C? How many members would it take just to accomplish the growth if nobody left? Now, that's not going to happen, but if nobody left, what would that take? In the case of this club, to get from 30 to 33, that's going to take 3 members. Then the next cell is the most important number on the page. How many members on average has your club lost over the past 3 years annually? Annual attrition over each of the past 3 years. In this club, it averages 5, which is about right. 13% attrition rate, roughly 35 member club. That's about 5 members. So then the question is, what does the membership committee need to be working on? What does it take to grow this Rotary Club from 30 to 33 while replacing the 5 additional members who are likely to leave the club this year? And that number, of course, is 8. Now, I can tell you that this club has not in any recent history ever attracted 8 new members a year. That's how they got in this problem. So let's get real about the fact that people will leave our club. They'll leave our club at about the rates they have been unless something dramatically changes. And then we talk about how many people we're going to have to replace and how much we want to grow. So if you knew nothing about the data, if you knew nothing at all about the data, some simple success targets would be these. Keep your attrition rate below the global average of 15%, 15% or less attrition. And if you wanted to grow at, say, a rate of about 5%, you'd want to attract members at a rate of about 20% a year. In the case of, again, a 40-member club, like the one we saw on the screen, 20 members a year would be about 8 new members, wouldn't it? 8 new members, we'll lose perhaps 5 or 6, we'll have consistent, moderate growth, and we'll be a stronger club. 5 years from now, we'll be an even stronger club 10 years from now. So, given your information on your worksheet, what problems do you now know you need to solve based on the data? Is it high attrition? Is it insufficient new member attraction? Is it both? Or is it neither one? By and large, insufficient new member attraction is, in my assessment, in most cases, the major cause of failure of a Rotary Club to grow. We're just not inviting people to join quickly at a sufficient rate. So we have some time for questions. And Leanne, I believe you're going to moderate that.
Terry, thank you so much. If everyone is like me and not an engineer or a numbers person, you might need to spend some more time on this, but I would feel encouraged knowing the number that I would need to grow. So Terry, thank you for having given us those tools. I want to actually focus on a question about quality versus quantity. And Louisa, I'm going to ask you this question. So should we focus when we're thinking about attracting new members on the quality of a candidate or quantity?
Ooh, that's a loaded one, isn't it? And that does come up a lot in clubs. And I think it may be a moot point. I mean, what we're seeing here is that we need to focus on the goals that we set. It's not just numbers for numbers' sake. It's numbers so that we can have the impact that we want to have in our communities, right? That's what this is about at the end of the day. And so I think sometimes we get a little bit too rigorous in what we do when we're bringing people in. And if we think about what most organizations do in a hiring situation, we might go through assessments and multiple interviews and all kinds of things. And at the end of the day, people are still going to leave, and we may not always get it right. So I think we need to focus on encouraging people to suggest people they know who are potential Rotarians. We need to be all over the leads that we get from RI. And we need to trust that if people are recommending others, and trust that if people are putting their hand up and saying they'd like to be part of the organization, we should be welcoming them and not quite so worried on what maybe was a past focus that got a little too heavy-handed in thinking about who's right. Absolutely, you want people that fit with your club, but you also, to be successful, we know that diversity is critical. But lots of lenses for diversity. And so I would suggest we need to be a little more open to who we're inviting at this point.
Thanks, Louisa. Doug, we had a lot of questions about age in Rotary and age gaps between some of our seasoned members and young members. Young members feel like the only people who can lead are retired members with time. There's not a question necessarily in this, but it came up a lot. So do you have thoughts in leadership and how we bridge some of these differences in our clubs?
It's actually, age is a very interesting question. Far too often, the perception that you have to be of a particular age comes primarily from people who are in that age. So I was in a situation earlier this year where very, very senior Rotarians were saying the only people who could make decisions about Rotary were people in their group. And that's just profoundly not true. To me, the issue of age is really, it's not about age. It's about the club and the quality of the club. And if you just bear with me for a second, the significant value of the data that Terry has provided and in his great work is what it lets us dive into and better understand the unique differences from club to club, and helps give us a tool through which we can begin to look at our unique situation in our unique community and encompassing all of our unique experiences. So what it allows us to do is really begin to individualize what our situation is. And so that's what it's about. It's not about age, it's about our situation. And it's about our ability to have an impact. I noticed that there was a comment in chat early on when Terry was talking about being uncomfortable with using data when what we need to talk about is impact. And impact means having the right diverse mixture of people continually growing and getting stronger that allows us to continue to grow and have a better impact on our communities.
Thanks, Doug. Yeah, Terry, we got a lot of people actually saying they weren't surprised by the data, but they wanted to know what next. And that makes sense, right? Everyone wants a roadmap. And I think to summarize what Doug just said, the map is going to look different for every club. But Terry, if you had to give people a piece of information about what's next, what would you recommend?
If you would like, you're welcome to go to the RI Zones 3334 website. Just search on RI Zone 33, and you'll find a whole lot of membership data there. If you just searched on the word intentional, you'd find 10 intentional strategies that are guaranteed to help you grow your Rotary Club. The first 3 of those had to do with prospecting. In my experience, now when I'm not doing this and when I'm not playing with the grandkids, I have a little business coaching practice. I help small business owners figure out how to solve problems they don't know how to solve. And in every case, when I see a small business that's not growing, it's exactly the same reason as a Rotary Club that's not growing. They don't know how to prospect. They are not bringing enough people to the table. You don't have to sell Rotary. All you have to do is show it to people. All you have to do is not be bashful about it. So I would say an intentional prospecting strategy to come up with potential members that your members know, not strangers, that we ought to be talking to, we ought to be bringing to, say, a Rotary information hour to teach them something about Rotary, not necessarily a club meeting. So those are some of the basics of what's worked for clubs that have grown, is they come up with a decent prospect list, their members approach those folks, invite them to learn something about Rotary, and they join.
Thanks, Terry. Louisa, I want to ask you a question about leadership. Doug talked about it a little bit with age, but how can we begin to think about leading in Rotary so that it's just not so hard? I know you approached your DG year differently, so maybe you can inspire others to think about this.
Well, I did actually, and I chose not to use the title DG because I wanted to give the message that we were going to do things differently. And I think language is very important. So I chose to be called the chair of the district leadership team. And that's very important because part of what I was doing was trying to make district leadership irresistible. I spend a lot of times working with clubs on being irresistible. And I think the same thing has to apply at the district and zone level, that people need to see themselves as being able to do this work, whether they're working full-time, as I was, or doing lots of other things, family, all of those things that come first need to be able to fit. So from my perspective, the most important thing from leadership is that we need to share it. We often think I'm the president, I'm the DG, I'm whatever. I have to do all of this myself. We've got to get out of that. We have to share that and build the team of people who can use the talents and skills that they have to best move the organization forward. So I didn't do club visits to every club. Rather, I asked clubs, what's your need? What do you most need help with? And let's find the best person on our leadership team to help you with that, because it might not be me. It might be something that I'm not an expert in. So we need to think differently about how we lead our clubs and our districts and share it more so that people that are working full-time can do these things. It is about being able to be more diverse. That's the other piece that's critical. Doug talked about age. Not that we don't want younger people when we said it isn't about age. Obviously, we want all different ages and all different lenses of diversity to be reflected, and our leadership will be a lot richer for it.
Thank you, Louisa. Terry, someone wanted to know the Rotary average attrition and attraction rates. I know you talked about it, but can you cover those again for us, just so people can benchmark?
Yes, globally, over the past 3 years averaged, globally, we have lost 14.6% of our membership each year. Now that's attrition. For the first 2 of those years, we had a net loss, and happily, this past year, we posted a net gain of, it's small, only 4,000 members, but it's better than the alternative. And so that's all blended into that 14.6% attrition rate. Our attraction rate, of course, is lower than that by about 1%. So historically, we have declined about 1% of membership globally, with the exception of this past year, which of course is part of that average. The North American average is 15.5%. And 15.5% is, easy math. You assume in a 40-member club, you're going to lose about 6 members. In a 100-member club, you're going to lose about 15. In my 200-member club, the same is true. We turn over an average Rotary Club every year in order to maintain a membership of 200. We got over it. We figured out a way to attract that many members.
Thanks, Terry. Someone asked, and I can provide the answer, and then I'm going to follow up with a question to all of you. Does data exist that tells us why people leave a Rotary Club? And recently, we have some pretty incredible data that tells us that there is a connection between satisfaction and retention, and that connection is comfort, and comfort with other people in your club. So Doug, I'm going to go to you and ask you how we begin to measure that. Again, if we are doing it, can we measure it? How do we measure comfort and the importance of that in a growing, vibrant club?
Well, the comfort one is actually really easy to do. I mean, any club could pretty easily put together a confidential, anonymous, and simple to complete survey of their members. Rotary has club survey resources. There are all kinds of ways that you can do it that allow you to have a real sense of how people are going, and it gives you a bit of a rational tool to look at things. And one of the values that I've learned over the years of surveys is if you are in a situation where you want to change something and you're running up against a small group of people or a strong personality that is really pushing to keep things the way they are and telling you, no, we can't change. What the club data allows you to do, what survey data allows you to do, is to point out to that person, well, wait a second, that's not really what everybody wants. So I would encourage you to have a look at surveying your club. Many clubs do that every year, every other year, and it allows you to keep a good handle on things. And then there's another real easy thing for you to do is, what's it feel like when you go to the meeting? What's it feel like in your tummy? Do you feel like going to the meeting? Do you want to find an excuse not to go? And so on.
Maybe I'll jump in too, because I love this one. And as I mentioned earlier, this idea of being irresistible as a club is really a key thing for me, and looking at all aspects of a club. And you can learn about those things from a survey. And I've just looked at data from over 400 current and past members of the district that I'm part of. And clearly we see lots of different things that relate to people's choices. We do have a lot of choices, and there are lots of things that are happening. It's not just COVID. A lot of people say, oh, we've gone down the last few years because of COVID. When we look at the graph of global membership, the slope of the line did not really change during COVID. Yes, it has an impact, absolutely, but it's not the big thing. The other things that we see, of course, people's lives are just super busy. We've got so many things happening with children and families. Our work life has changed. Some of that has been COVID related, but even without COVID, many people are always on. It's the 24/7 work kind of environment. All of those things need to be considered as we think about the people that we want to attract, what will be irresistible and workable for them, which is why a lot of the new flexibility is really important. How do we diversify that range of people? And how do we ensure that we have from a business perspective, the value proposition to really be irresistible for them? And that is what we see over and over. And at the same time, we need to be thinking about the values and the 4 strategic priorities of Rotary and make sure that that underlies what we do in our clubs to be truly irresistible.
Terry, I want to give you a chance to address maybe some of the skeptics on the call who are looking at the numbers and either don't think it quite tracks or aren't going to take action on it. You know, they say these numbers are nice, but this isn't my problem. Help us reframe that for them.
Sure. And I've heard this. I've done this in countless membership seminars and membership summits around our entire zone. And it's not uncommon for somebody to hold up their hand and say, Terry, these numbers aren't right. And my answer to that in every case is, well, they may not be right, but they're the numbers that your club has been paying dues on for each of the July 1st of the past 5 years. In other words, I mean, these numbers are pulled right off the Rotary International site. They reflect every member you've added. They reflect every member you've lost over the past, again, average of 3 years. The total membership July 1st and 5 years, this data is rock solid. However, of course, if your club's not doing a very good job of administration, leaving people on the books that are phantoms, that sort of thing, then obviously that data is going to be mistaken. But I think that's rare. The fact is that as I went through this a couple of years ago, with a district, a group of district leaders, a group of governors that hadn't seen it before. One of the people on the Q&A said, you know, you just really can't run away from this, can you? And he was right. You really can't run away from this. You got to wear it. Your club has a culture, whether you like it or not. You just got to face up to what that is. And if you don't like it, then it's time to change it. But you can't do that unless you know what the facts are.
Okay, while we're on that, Terry, why don't you let us know what other things you'd like us to take away?
Sure. Well, one of those things is attrition's real and it's highly predictive. Unless something changes, the rate of attrition and the count of attrition, people that leave your club in a year, is going to be pretty much the same. And this is not a caveat it's hard to provide here, because in my experience watching Rotary clubs, things rarely do actually change. I'd encourage you to be a change agent in your club. If you don't like the results, stop doing the same things. That'll get you more of the same results. Your attraction rate has to exceed your attrition rate. It seems like simple math, but we always want to forget. We always want to forget in about February or March, when our membership is up like +2 members, we get all excited about that, which we should, but we don't want to forget that on average, we've lost 5 members a year, and so far we've only lost 1. There's about 4 more to go. That +2 is going to melt away in June. It's going to become that standard -2. So now here's something that's maybe hard to swallow, but chronic membership decline, like I said, it's not about the numbers. The number is a metric of success. The number is a metric of successful attraction and retention of members. And if that's not working right, it's not the numbers that are causing that, it's the club. Chronic membership decline, loss of members over long periods of time, is a symptom of leadership dysfunction within the club. The leaders are either focused on the wrong things, or they haven't got their wheels lined up, organized, so they can make things better. Now, that brings up the point that you may not be able to fix this yourself. Like I said, I get hired as a coach of small businesses by business owners who can't figure out how to fix a problem that they've got. I've got a lot of experience solving business problems. Now, I can't fix everybody, but in most cases, I can pretty much put a finger on what the problem is that needs to be solved. Together, we work out the solution, but of course, it's up to them to execute it. And by and large, they do. So ask for outside help. Your outside help resource would be your district membership chair and your current sitting district governor. I go to those 2 people and say, hey, enough of all this. I can see that our club declined from 50 to 40 over 5 years, and from 40 to 30 over the next 5. And now we're down in the 20s, and this is not going to end well. We need some help.
Thanks, Terry. I have the fun of giving you a little bit of a taste of what's coming. You have 1 more session. And that session really takes what we've been doing and kind of hit where the rubber hits the road. What are we going to do? So what? Now what? How are we going to take this new understanding and move forward to make some changes and to see the results we want to see? So I'm going to give you a little acronym, because that's what we do, is an acronym. And we often say that when you go to a session like this, you want to take away 1 really good idea. So my acronym is going to be IDEA, and I'm cheating a bit to say that it has 4 parts. So the first part, the I, that's my little Rotarier dog. I have a stuffed dog and I call him a Rotarier, and that's him looking in the mirror and seeing a real dog. He's not a real dog. This is internal focus. That's what we've been talking about today. And what we want you to do before the session that we do in November is to really take the time to look internally, look in the mirror, try to understand your club, and is it irresistible? Does it reflect your community? Is it relevant? Is it living by the strategic priorities of the organization to know that you're providing the kind of service and having the impact and engaging people in the way that we all want to do. So internal focus is very critical. You've got the data to understand some things about your club that you may not have known before, and you can look at all of the assessments. We have so many great tools. There are assessment tools, health checks. There's the tools that come through the membership team. There's the learning center. There's the president's citation or Rotary citation. Look at all of those and see where you measure up and be realistic as you do so. So that's the internal focus. Next one, the D, external focus. Determine what's going on around you. What's happening in your community? What are the needs and the opportunities? Where are the gaps? Knowing what you know about your club from the internal part, how can you start to meet some of those needs and fill some of those gaps and have even more impact, right? So building partnerships, building those kinds of teams that you need to build to have greater impact. Then the E. The E is exploring the gaps and making some decisions about what you're going to do next. I used to talk about strategic planning a lot. I talk now about strategic doing. How are we going to take what we know about our club and what we know about outside of our club where we operate and make some choices and decisions about, again, how do we impact what we're doing as much as possible? How do we be as irresistible as possible? How do we imagine, all right, good one for this year, we're imagining Rotary being able to decide and to determine how we maximize that impact. And then the last one, here's my dog leaping in the air with action. Doug, what are we going to do from that one?
So everybody, I have a big job for you to do right now. What I want you to do is take your hands and put them together like this. And what I'd like you to do with your hands together like this is to imagine that your left hand is where your club is at today, and your right hand is where you've determined you need to go. Okay? So now I also want you to imagine that those hands are being held together by an elastic. Slowly pull your hands apart so they're about shoulder width. And what I want you to sort of imagine is the tension that you would feel by stretching that elastic. That tension is the tension that you need to manage in the process of moving from where you are today to where you need to be tomorrow, to the end that you want to achieve. So I want you to be thinking between now and the next session about managing the tension, about stretching the elastic. And here's what I'd like you to do. Over the next few days, we are going to send you a summary of the IDEA. What I'd like you to do is to review that summary, to take a look at your membership data, with all of the data that was in the presentation that Terry presented. Maybe you want to review the whole webinar and Terry's presentation. Have a hard look at your club, your community, and where you think you want to go. Because next time, Louisa and I are going to take you together on a journey and through the process of stretching your elastic.
Thanks, Doug. That's a great metaphor for thinking about the tension as we pull apart. I think some of us may have experienced that in Rotary before, that sometimes that happens, and how it can snap back on us, or how we can move forward and do some really great things. So just a reminder, I, for internal focus, know what you're doing within your club and what your club looks like. Be real with it, right? Terry talked about that. Be real with that. The D, determine what's going on around you. The E, explore the gaps. How can you meet more of those needs? And the A, leap for joy in the air as you take action. So those are the things we're going to come back, as Doug said, on November the 9th. Please look at the data for your club. You have some homework to do, to really think about that. And you've got a bit more time now before that next one to do that, and to think about how you can make your club more irresistible and more relevant and increase your impact, right? And that comes only if we have the members to deliver. So yes, the data are critical. The impact is where that takes us. So we want to thank you very much. We hope we will see you on November the 9th when we're going to talk about the so what and the now what. And we hope we'll have more questions. You're going to receive some more information to think about that over the next few days. And we want to thank you very much. Carrie also mentioned, feel free to ask for help. Well, we're available to you too. I may regret this, but by saying that we will be happy to do presentations and to do sessions for you in your regions around the world. We will do everything we can to support the needs that you have to make sure that you're able to use all of this in the most effective way. So thank you again very much for joining us, and we will look forward to seeing you on November the 9th.